Hey all, it's Mac,
I'm Adrian.
here talking about the international experiences of queer people.
All right, so once again, we need to advise a trigger warning because we're going to be talking about murder, rape, graphic violence, and queerphobic rhetoric. Also, when we use the phrase gay stuff, we mean gay sex, congregating with other queers, being open with your sexuality in public, and other normal human behaviors. In this video, queer means all LGBTQIA plus people, and gay means specifically homosexual.
All right, let's start with Poland and Russia because they are hot topics for homophobia and transphobia. They are some of the worst developed countries for queer people to live in. In Poland, in autumn of 2020, whole counties became LGBT-free zones. County leaders declared that they would denounce LGBT ideology because it goes against their Catholic values. Queer people in these zones are in danger of being beaten because the local justice system is on the side of the county leaders. They're not going to protect them. Luckily, these zones are not legally binding. They are the political equivalent of a kid's room door saying, keep out. The rise in rhetoric and violence came from President Andrzej Duda. He's very outspoken in his homophobia, saying that we queers are, quote, not equal to normal people, and that we are part of a rainbow plague.
All right, so Russia is basically the homophobic capital of the developed world. Pride parades were banned in 2012 after the Kremlin said that there was to be a 100-year ban on demonstrations. They also put in place a law banning gay propaganda, which was enforced after images of Putin in makeup were circulating the internet. Any pro-queer media is considered propaganda, and while they're outlawed, rallies still happen, but almost always end in riot, police, and extreme violence. A 2020 amendment to the Constitution banned same-sex marriage. And here's a little not so fun fact. 18% of Russians, a little less than 26 million people, want all queers eliminated from society. In this case, elimination means having a society without queers, or mass segregation where queers live in their own place away from the main Russian population. Both Poland and Russia have dwindling queer populations as people flee in fear of their lives.
Russian and Polish homophobia is not unique to many parts of the world. Let me try that again. Russian and Polish homophobia is not unique to many other parts of the world. They see queerness as going against a common religious institution, and that same reason is especially prevalent in countries that were victims of colonization. Much of queerphobic legislation was born by European colonization when Christian values were forced onto the people of the world. Many Islamic nations that perpetuate queerphobic laws also suffered this effect of colonization or became more queerphobic in response to denouncing Western lifestyles. In any case, being racist or xenophobic towards someone because of their religion is unacceptable because values are not universal.
All right, so in India, being queer has been described as a constant struggle. For example, lesbians in India face way worse persecution than gay men. The attitude toward gay men in urban India is pretty accepting, but transgender people and lesbian women still face the most discrimination. In rural parts of India, the treatment of queer peoples is so much worse. In many Indian villages, secret honor killings for gay men are planned, and the only way for a young gay man to survive is to run away. And that often means having no money and no social support. And in other parts, lesbian women are subjected to corrective rapes, which are often perpetuated by their own family members. According to one transgender woman, village medics and babas often prescribe rape to cure lesbians of homosexuality. Refusal to marry brings more physical abuse. These attitudes and actions force many queers to live in the closet or move away. Since homosexuality was only legalized in India in 2018, it'll be a very long time until these attitudes dissipate.
Queer history in Thailand is unique to the world. The country became a queer vacation staple starting as early as the 1970s. The Buddhist culture of Thailand creates a surface level of tolerance for queer people, so acts of violence are rare, but discrimination is still very prevalent, especially in the workplace. Because of this, many queer people turn to the entertainment industry, which results in a lot of gay TV. I'm not kidding when I say there are so many gay, cheesy rom-coms that come out of Thailand. It's kind of unfortunate that, some of them fetishize gay men, but Sodus is really good. It's on Netflix, totally recommend it. And cinema and TV, unfortunately, they give the impression that Thailand is accepting despite the discrimination, but that isn't true at all for trans people.
Yeah, so in Thailand, it's illegal to change your sex or gender on any official documents, and gender reassignment will not be recognized. Ironically, Thailand is the sexual reassignment surgery capital of the world. The network of doctors and hospitals that began performing these surgeries started in 1975. Thailand became a queer vacation hotspot because the majority of people that have these surgeries are foreigners. Why? Well, for example, it's cheaper to have a round trip to Thailand plus a surgery plus post-op treatment than for only the base cost of one surgery in the United States. Trans-based discrimination is explicit, though. Many have to wear uniforms of their gender assigned at birth as opposed to their actual gender.
Okay. Many trans women are called the offensive slur of ladyboy. If you have heard that phrase before, it's because of a transphobic trope where straight men will joke about making sure it's a woman if you decide to be with a prostitute while in Thailand. That trope started because trans women had nowhere to turn besides sex work to make a living, much like the trans women in the United States. In good news, though, there's an annual Miss Tiffany's Universe pageant meant to celebrate trans women of Thailand.
So in China, South Korea, and Japan, gay stuff is allowed legally, but social homophobia and transphobia is very present. If you're gay or LGBTQ+, you can't marry or adopt. Transitioning gender is allowed, but you must have had surgery beforehand, which is the same as most US states. Violence towards queer people and also disowning queer children is very, very common in these countries. Vietnam is very similar to these countries, but has a very specific problem of teachers teaching children that same-sex attraction and being trans is a disease. Also, that queerness is reversible. This leads to increased violence and suicides amongst youth. In Malaysia, Singapore, and Myanmar, gays are imprisoned anywhere from 2 to 20 years. It can be really hard for queer people, especially trans people, to live safely and freely in many countries. And then you have Taiwan, the most progressive Asian country, period. Gay marriage was legalized in 2019, and pride festivals every year there are explosive. Trans people can legally change their gender after surgery, and conversion therapy is banned.
According to the Human Rights Watch, members of the LGBTQIA+ community in the Middle East face the criminalization of same-sex conduct, gender nonconformity, arbitrary arrests, ill treatment, lack of recognition of trans people, violence, extrajudicial killings, restrictions on freedom of expression, association, family rejection, and social stigma. Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Afghanistan all have the death penalty as the maximum punishment for gay sex, while most have imprisonment as the punishment. Modern history in Islamic countries especially is bleak for queer people because of governments cracking down on conservative values. This is not because of the religion itself, but the governments wanting to try and be as anti-Western as possible. Apparently, queerphobia is anti-Western. Anyway, a bunch of activists came together to form a video series called No Longer Alone to voice their experiences in the Middle East and North Africa.
So many North African countries are Islamic states or have large Islamic populations, so that's why the region is often lumped in with the Middle East in terms of LGBTQ rights. 9 African countries are on a Forbes list called 20 Most Dangerous Places for Gay Travelers. These places would give any queer tourist the same legal or social punishments that citizens would get. The most dangerous on this list is Nigeria because being queer, not even doing gay stuff, just being queer, just existing, is punishable with up to 14 years in prison. In some Nigerian states, death is the punishment under Sharia law. Uganda is another important country to discuss because of its prevalence in the media.
A few years ago, there was a rumor that the Ugandan government held a public execution of a gay man. That did not happen, but here's how the rumor started. The Ugandan government has been cracking down on homosexuality punishment since 2014. The country was in the spotlight in October 2019 when prominent gay activist Brian Roswa was beaten to death. As people and organizations asked the government to denounce vigilante killings of queer people, some officials threatened they would instill a death penalty for doing gay stuff instead. Fortunately, they did not.
So many other African countries also suffer from vigilante killings of queer people and activists, and some governments even encourage them. The country with the orange-red stripe shading is Somalia, and vigilante murders are encouraged. In 4 out of the 34 countries in Africa where gay sex is illegal, the death penalty is the maximum punishment. These countries are Somalia, Somaliland, Mauritania, and Nigeria. The safest African country is South Africa, and it's even more progressive than the US in terms of legal protections because it has banned conversion therapy.
Caribbean islands you may have heard of or even traveled to are extremely dangerous for queer people of all kinds, especially for trans people. Barbados, the Maldives, Jamaica, and St. Lucia are all on that Forbes list, too. Many current governments mirror that of the African nations. None enforce a death penalty, though. The indigenous views of both African and worldwide island countries teach that gender and homosexuality is a spectrum. Speaking towards homosexuality, it wasn't criminalized in any African or island nation until European colonization.
So, only going as far back as the medieval era, so including African empires, Islamic empires, and the Ottoman empires, homosexuality was never criminalized. So throughout the Caribbean, Polynesian, Melanesian, and Micronesian history, it's the same story. It may not have been fully accepted, but legislation pushing for imprisonment and death was non-existent until European colonizers forced Christian values on the indigenous populations. Europeans decided that homosexuality was a sin.
Thank you.
See you next time.